So, good morning again, if you've just joined us. So what we're gonna do is start with a Chagall. I thought that would be okay. I'm gonna move you around, try not to make you seasick. Just get the tilt. There's glass in front of many of these, so I'm gonna be challenged by a little bit of glare. Can everyone get a good view of that and see that? Okay.
It looks great, Tina.
Good. So the first thing I want to ask you guys, and if you want to answer in chat, it might be easier since there's so many of you for me to see whose hands raised or not, but send me a chat message if you have something to say. But I want everyone to take like a minute and really just kind of focus on this. I can get a little closer too. Okay, so a couple more seconds. Okay, so while we look at this together, I'm going to pan back a little bit. Right there. What are we looking at? What do we see with our eyes?
Well, obviously we see a mother holding her child. So it looks like the child is crying, maybe.
You're talking about the foreground here? Mm-hmm. These figures, and you're saying that this is the mother holding a child and
the child.
Her child? And
I think so.
Okay, and what makes you think that they're related in that way?
Just the way she's cradling her and protecting her. It has a real Madonna kind of feeling to it, especially when you look at the hands and that weird space between the forefinger and the middle finger. Okay,
so you're sort of thinking that this is maybe Chagall's sort of homage to some more Renaissance or early Madonna and child imagery?
Yes, yes.
Good. I see that some people are picking up on the painful expressions on their faces. So while we're still talking about the foreground figures, we're looking at these faces, and the pain is expressed in what? How do you see pain?
Tina, would you prefer us just to talk or to type in the chat?
I guess if we're not talking over one another, it's easier for me if we can talk. But if we get really excited and everybody's kind of talking at the same time, then I can refer to the chat.
Okay, so I guess maybe some initial person can respond, and then if other people have other ideas, they can add to the chat.
That would be great.
Okay. Well, I think maybe the open mouths and the furrowed brows and wide eyes kind of make us think that they're not quite happy right now.
Right. So we're really looking at those bright wide eyes and the wide mouths, and all of them, they both have sort of the same kind of expression. And people have been talking about the overall color of the piece. and that adding to the sort of emotional feel. And I've also had someone, Barbara has said that she's noticed this village in the fire. Is this what you're talking about, Barbara? So you want to talk about that a little bit? What kind of?
Well, it seems to me it's almost like she's in smoke, and she is, and then the way her hair's blowing, that, you know, how the heat and the air pressure changes when that happens. So there is a lot of wind, and okay, so I'm just into the whole physical thing.
Okay, yeah. So you're seeing the sort of smoke and the fire, but it's also, you're seeing that echoed in her hair.
Right, yeah.
I see that. And where's the smoke? I mean, I see some smoke around the fire. Do you see smoke that sort of connects her?
I feel like she's within the smoke.
She's inside it. So there's sort of a kind of the air.
It could just be nighttime, but it's the way it's modeled, you know, just that's what it made me think of.
Great. So I have a question about when this was painted. The easiest way that we can find that out is in the title. And it was painted somewhere between 1940 and 1943. So what does that kind of indicate to us as educators with a lot of background knowledge? Yes? World War II?
Right.
So with the background knowledge that we have and some of the observations of the emotional colors used, let's talk about this green, because there's other emotions that we often connect with, some of the fear and pain that we've been talking about. What does this green and yellow do?
I think it contributes to the feeling of worry.
What makes you think that? What connects green with worry, or this green, his use of green?
I don't know, like maybe food going bad.
Okay, so there's an association with green being something unhealthy, something that would cause us some sort of pain. Good. Anything else that people are thinking about?
Toxicity.
Toxicity, yes, that's definitely a green sort of yuck face as well. Good. All of these are good observations about this, and thank you for all of these insights. What I want to do is go actually to the next one rather than me tell you something that I know about this piece, and we'll kind of get into that. So I'm going to move the.
Can I ask you a quick question? There looks like a little ermine down in the lower right-hand corner. What is that?
Does anybody want to venture?
It doesn't look like a dog or a cat. It looks more like that ermine.
I've seen dog and cat in the comments. It's a little bit hard.
Okay.
And in the mat job, they've kind of, oops, sorry. In the mat job, they've kind of maybe cut him off, or maybe, no, that's the paper. That's not the mat job. So he's sort of coming off the paper. It could be, you know, sort of a horse or goat character. And I say that because I see sort of potentially hoof, but that could also be paw. It's hard to tell without seeing his ears, right?
Just really odd looking.
It is, and I think the odd looking thing, do you think that adds anything to the whole aspect of what the emotional content of this is? As we're walking, oops, sorry.
Maybe it adds to the uncertainty.
Yes, I think so. Especially like, you know, what is this place? You know, we talked about World War II, but yes, it is a disproportional goat. You know, do we have an idea of where this village might be?
It makes me think of some of those towns like in France that were destroyed by the Germans. And that kind of gas that they use, I think that might be more World War I though.
Yeah, the mustard gas.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to get away from that with that color. Is there anything else that signals France other than any other area? to you?
Well, the hill just reminds thinking of the Alps, you know.
Good. Good. Okay, I'm going to move on so we have time to see some other pieces. As we're walking educator to educator, this is not part of the visual thinking strategy, but there is not a lot of those menacing pictures existent in Chagall's work because they were sort of labeled as degenerate art by the Nazis, and they were destroyed, actually. So the fact that you see one here is rather unusual because there are not many that are in existence. Sorry about the reflection there. Can you see the art even though you can see my phone?
Mm-hmm.
So now I would like for you to, with your scrap piece of paper for the minute, rather than focusing with your eyes and doing nothing else, I want you to just kind of sketch the piece. Just the main bits, things that you find speak to you or important, and just kind of recreate this piece in your best hand as if you were going to describe it to somebody, just some shorthand. I can get closer. Okay, so finish up your sketch. Really hone in on what you think is the most important part in this image. Try and line it up a little bit. Okay, now that you've focused on this piece and tried to recreate it, what sticks out? What are we looking at here?
The geometric planes really stick out to me.
So where specifically are you seeing these planes?
The hand and the arm really stood out to me.
Here?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you want to say about those? What else do you want to say about those geometric planes? I
think it's really interesting way to express the three-dimensionality of the foreshortening of the hand and the arm. And it makes that hand and arm seem really emphasized and like it's coming forward.
Very strong.
Strong, great. I heard that too. I think that what you're saying here is that by making this hand very blocky and architectural and sort of pushing it forward, it gives that sense of strength and solidity. Is that correct? What else can we see in this?
It almost looks like the hands and arms are like a foot in front of the face. And maybe the hands are emphasized to be so large since maybe she worked on a plantation or worked for somebody, or she physically did work with her hands all day long.
Okay, so you're saying the overemphasis in scale of her hands also fortifies that that sense of strength and working. What makes you think plantation? What's evidence can you point to?
I'm being a terrible person and just assuming, which is probably not the best answer here, but with the time period, it looks like it's early or 1800s maybe, or I'm not exactly sure where put the time period.
Okay. Does anybody think that this is also in the sort of late 19th century? Are you saying that this worker then, because of that time period, also is African American?
I think it's more Cubist looking.
Okay.
Maybe more like 1920s, something like that.
Okay, so.
And it does, at first glance, you know, the width of the nose and the large lips give it some African American features. But then there's a star to the right behind her head. And it makes me wonder if she's like some kind of internment camp.
Mm-hmm.
I'll chime in. The first thing I noticed actually was that star. My eye did not, I looked at her, but I went straight back to the star and I got just a very strong flag reference because of the stripes on her dress and then the star in the background. So some sense of loyalty or disloyalty, whichever way you want to look at that.
So the sense that this is symbolic and has a sort of flag feel creates a relationship of maybe some sort of reactionary role that she's playing. Is that one way or the other? She's sort of representing action.
Correct. I don't, you know, other than the fist and the symbol of strength, but the eyes are more of a sorrowful as opposed to a strong, empowered. She looks pretty disabled just with the glaze or the gaze of her eyes off to the side. So I think that mixed message of the symbolism there, it doesn't feel like I'm gonna take up cause and charge on. It seems like she's struggling with, or she or he is struggling with, which, you know, they have the power, but they look disabled to be able to use it in some fashion with the glare of the eyes.
So mainly that expression in the face, you're saying this, the strength that we're getting in the hands and maybe a reactionary relationship to some sort of political symbol. There's a stasis. She's very stationary and she's not necessarily moving to act on anything. And maybe
correct.
There's some inability there despite that sense of strength. Is that what you're?
Yes, thank you for summing it up far better than I was.
Is there anything else that anybody else wants to say about this piece?
Yes, I would like to add, I see this deep intensity of the mood in the work, and it's because of the lines throughout and the expression. However, I would say in contrast to that, I see a lot of strength and like composure. And I feel those lines and the geometric shapes and the hard edges also have not just a cubist feel, but a sculptural feel, a three-dimensional feel, which furthers, it kind of gives me that feeling of like strength of like a tree or something. And I don't know if some of my other experience or background, but I don't get the feeling of weakness or I get the feeling of, despite the weight and the pressures, there's still this strength there and this resolve there based on the hand being like rather horizontal, and like planted across and then being led up to that face. And that kind of like triangular shape of that arm, the second arm that's vertical, really giving you the feeling of a tree with the fists being kind of like gripped together like branches up to that face where that thought is. So, and then the hair even reminded me like of a strong oak tree with the irregular lines and all that are going around like leaves or the top of a tree. So, and then the face, the lines in it for me reminds you of like the ridges and the marks and textures of a tree. So for me, I feel that it's like a tired tree or old tree, so to speak, or there's been a lot of experience there. However, despite all of that, with all the texture and the shape, it's still very strong and like it can wither or it can kind of carry on through adversity. So I'm kind of getting a different read in a way, slightly different.
Thank you. I think that some people were picking up on a sort of stationary feel that might have cast an immobility on her. You're almost perceiving strength, like this is a root system and the trunk and then, you know, growth, but also maintaining the sense that we got originally from some people's observations about her thoughtful or sad expression, is that maybe the tree or the figure here has witnessed things that have a detrimental effect. Is that something?
Yes, yeah.
Good. I love all of these ideas. Is there any other thoughts that we need to explore before we move away from this one? This one moves me a lot, so I wanted to make sure that we had a little chance to talk about it.
Who was the artist?
This is Charles White. It is called Awaiting His Return, and it's 1945. So we can go, I can tell you a little bit. Yes, there is a lot of work implied in that. So we can go into it once we've talked about what we're doing here in the visual thinking strategy. So I have one more that I want to kind of take the same kind of look at. So if you get nauseous, I'm sorry. For those of you, I don't know if there's any Klimt fans, but I'll just do a quick little glance by. Thank you. That's the Klimt, but we're not going to talk about it. Sorry. Okay. So again, we're dealing with reflection. I apologize. Little glare in there. I can move this around if that reflection of my phone. Can everyone see that? Okay, so on your scrap piece of paper for this one, take a minute, and from the minute I say start, I want you to stream of consciousness, just write stuff that you see and that you think is important. So start now and just write down notes, stream of consciousness, no punctuation, just respond to it in words. See if I can get a better shot of this baby. Okay, last thoughts. All right, now that you stream of consciousness this, what in the world are we looking at?
Child climbing.
A child climbing. Are you meaning this light figure here?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And a skeleton. Yeah.
And a skeleton in the back. What makes you think this is a child?
Just because of the dimensions and
scale.
the other figure being so big.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a child. Any relationship to the other figures?
Well, possibly they want to be a part of whatever. Yeah.
So you're seeing
either that or pulling something apart, you know.
Okay, so you're seeing this middle figure being pulled apart by the other two figures?
No, I don't think that. I think the child figure just seems to be either pulling something down or trying to get up, but from the leg, it looks like they're trying to get up.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So there's a sort of climbing and reaching,
yeah,
vertical movement.
Yeah.
Good.
Good. It's very bizarre.
She looks like she's torn between death and life.
Yes, there's a sort of ripping apart. And what part is death to you? What makes you say that?
The skeleton on the back side, and then life is the baby on the front side. And maybe this woman went through trauma giving birth.
So for you, this might be a sort of birth story gone really, really macabre.
Yeah. Yeah. I never had to give birth, and I don't think I will ever, but and maybe some other people can give their opinion on what that pain may feel like.
So Mandy, you said something about the breasts in this figure.
Yeah, I think it really exemplifies how that child needs the mother for survival, the nourishment that's provided by the mother to the child. But of course, we can think of nourishment in so many other ways as well.
So you mean the proximity of the
child's hands to the mother's chest.
So go with that for a second. The proximity of the child's hands to the breasts. What else do you notice about that relationship?
It just looks like the child is clinging on to his mother for dear life as she's being pulled away by some scary darkness. And
do you see the child as being able to feed?
No, it looks very desperate to me.
So the child looks desperate. What other evidence do you see that would create this inability for this child to feed?
She looks like she's being pulled away, like her head is bent away from him. Her body is being bent away. The knee in the front makes it look like she wants to go forward, but the way she's contorted backwards seems like she's unable to.
And we think this skeleton figure is preventing the nourishment of the child?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I guess the skeleton in the darkness kind of makes you think of the death symbol.
So this shroud of black that sort of hides death, but stays really close to the skeleton, kind of gives you that sort of death figure feel, the cloak.
That death archetype figure.
Right.
Yeah.
Anything else strike out to anybody?
Who is the artist?
The artist is Kata Kulvitz. It's called Woman in Death, and the date is 1910. So what does that tell us?
And is it a lithograph?
It is. It's an etching.
Woodblock, probably.
It's an etching.
It's a little hard to see with the glare.
Yes, I'm sorry.
No worries. You're doing a great job.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'm struck by the legs and how strong the main figure's legs are. And one is smooth and then one is very rough.
This one more rough.
It crosses over to have this sort of beastly darkness. The textures change. So it's like they're wrestling with darkness. And then I'm thinking more male leg versus female leg.
This one seems more male to you?
Yeah. So that's where it just sort of becomes this human versus beast kind of abstraction a bit.
You sort of get the sense that the child is clinging to her mother for life while the mother is sort of succumbing to death.
So that's what I wanted to ask. Who is on the verge of death? Who do we think is closer to death? Who's the and the protagonist in the story?
The female mother. Yeah.
And I feel like the mother is giving in, you know, like it makes me think of poetry about sort of feeling like as if the comfort of dying is something that is drawing in the mother.
So
the child really needs the mother and is clinging desperately.
So there may be a sense of release even from a painful death and separation with the child.
Mm-hmm.
That perhaps this struggle may be less difficult than this struggle. Or this is more difficult than...
I just keep thinking of Robert Frost's poems about two roads and the road less traveled, and you know that whole idea that death can be comforting.
Anybody else see a sort of fork in the road?
I agree with the threshold with the legs, like one is smooth and one is rough. Yeah.
I agree. I noticed that too, Amy. And it's interesting, Melissa, I used the same word in my stream of consciousness with words was succumbing. And that leg being extended, but yet that battle, the child kind of holding on and pulling back. I don't know, but the way the head is thrown back in the arms, there's a succumbing or like this monster, and almost the monster becoming, the mother becoming part of that. Because of like what Amy said, that one leg is so dark and it's really being with all the texture that's so much more prominent and it's longer. So it's kind of taking over. And then you do have that other side of her that's not kind of affected yet. So I just feel it's very much a battle, and that whole monster or death look has that great hold on her because of that. So yeah, I kind of agree with both those, you know, views, perspectives.
So there's a sort of transition maybe where in the center of the composition, you've got a sort of state or state of being that's different from this side. Is that what I'm feeling? Like there's a transition almost that's happening towards the center being that crux, where we've seen male to female or dark to light or almost beast-like to human. Is that a correct paraphrasing? Good. And
it's even interesting how strong that line is between the right and the left, between life and death.
The center line, you mean?
Right. There's like all these other dark lines that really divide it.
I'm trying to get it so that the phone is not right there where you're talking about it. So what's the most important contour line you think is happening here? Are you saying a compositional line down the center straight? Or?
Yeah, that's what you just did with your hand. It's more of a diagonal from, you know, it starts with the child's dark lines, okay, and then it leads right up sort of in her arm and shoulder and even into the line of her chin. And on the left of that, and then to the left of that, it's very dark and masculine looking and skeletal, death-like.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of that, it's very softer and more curvilinear and more filled with light and life.
Good. So really a sense of whether this symbolizes depression or death or some other metaphor for what we know as educators is, you know, the time being of 1910, this may have some reaction to what's going on in the world. There's some splitting apart and a 1 foot in one place and another foot in another. Is that a good sort of feel for that?
I think it's all that.
Yeah. Okay, so we've looked at 3 pieces using this visual thinking strategy. So what I wanted to do is kind of ask you as educators now to think about what are the things that I used when we looked at all 3 of the pieces. What are some of the strategies that I used?
I think you did very close listening and restating, trying to restate what we said as accurately as possible.
Thank you, good. Restating, that's definitely, there's a sense of the facilitator or the teacher really trying to understand and hear what the person's saying. But in the act of paraphrasing, there's an opportunity to start linking one person's comments to the others. Even if you're contrasting, you're creating a bridge. So that's very adept. Anything else in the strategies that I was using between all 3?
Asking if someone would like to say more.
Yes, that's the sort of sense of, is there something else that we haven't talked about? Is there something more, rather than reaching a conclusion or an end where there's a big reveal and we talk about what does this really mean? Actually, you're all wrong, you know, like.
I think the sketching really helped to focus on what we were seeing, so that when you had asked before, what are you looking at? When you're sketching, what are you choosing to draw? So, yeah.
Yes,
I know that's very basic, but for me as not an art teacher, I just.
Thank you. As part of this, there's a tenet of really having an opportunity to focus more than what we would normally give a piece of artwork or even a graphic that we may see during our life. So it may take the form of just simply focusing or sketching. Those are helping you as a teacher cross over into areas where English may not be the first language, or you're really struggling with a group that writing might not be, that might become a barrier. So you can use some sort of nonverbal ways to focus people's attention. And when we did write about it, that's one way that, say, a language arts teacher could use visual thinking and looking at art to kind of get them really writing about what they see. So one more thing, these are all absolutely correct and right on target, very adept. One more thing about, once we identified something that we saw with our eyes, what kind of response, what follow-up did you kind of get?
I felt like we got a lot of inquisitive questioning, like, can you push this further a little more or build off of it?
Good, good. Anybody else?
Well, you asked us to also do a lot of deep looking without giving us any background on the piece, so that we were really free to try to figure out how we saw it. Did we see it as a World War I or World War II or you know, whatever, you know, it didn't even have to be about war.
The biggest thing is that I'm not directing you in some way, but rather the evidence of what you're saying about the piece is coming from your observation of the piece completely. So the research that Abigail House and Philip Yenowine did while they were coming up with the visual thinking strategies was, the minute that we think as teachers that we're unveiling or shedding light on what this really means, we're also signaling to our students that they're not right, that we know more. And so they end up leaving thinking, well, there's still some barrier between what I know and what she might know about that painting. And so what you're doing is you're kind of undermining the goal, which is to empower them into figuring, I have the ability to look at something critically and figure something out on my own. I think that's, as an educator, the hardest part. That's the biggest challenge, because I know a lot about where this is coming from, and I want to share that with you. And when kids come to the museum, I will say that that is a part of what we do. But there are a lot of museums that have adopted this visual thinking strategy so entirely that really the students are forced to go and do their own research in those images that have really stayed with them. The idea being that that image, say if we spent, the ideal time is maybe 20 minutes on each image. If we spent 20 minutes and you had a really engaged conversation, those kids are gonna leave knowing more about that image than if we spent a good 10 minutes with me trying to talk to them about history and context, and they leave more empowered. And so there's a practice that you can use, you know, this little book is really, really great for giving you practical advice, especially when you're trying to combine certain other disciplines in the classroom. So you could even apply it to math problems, where you kind of have the problem there and the kids are really left to figure out how to attack it, you know, in terms of how do we reach a solution and an answer. And the problem solving comes from within. And then when they go back to their papers and they go to solve it, they've used all of the information that the group has established, rather than you sitting there trying to tell them 3 + 3 = 5 divided by what have you. So for those of us that are really trying to have a goal of connecting to other disciplines or integrating other disciplines into your strategy, then looking at artwork in this way creates an environment where they say after about 10 really good sessions, you can, you should be able to have a much more capable group that can then show more evidence-based observations. They can be a little bit more detailed in their observations when they go back and look at something. So yes, I did give a link to this book, to an Amazon thing to this book. And like I said, it's a really quick read, it talks about the history of their research, and it also has a lot of very quick sort of key bulleted items. So you can kind of look at it before class and say, okay, I got it. I know where I'm going with it. And it is hard because I know that there's content, you know, for me, I'm in a luxury place that there's content that I want to give to students, but I also know that there's content that you have to give to students. But this incorporation of this kind of critical thinking on top of the sort of top-down distribution of information enables them to have those times during the classroom to teach themselves and to really find that strength within, so that the next time they come into a problem or something they don't understand, they have the ability to attack it together.
Can you say more?
Now yes. I have a question. There are a few other works. You chose 3 works that are actually easy to take in.
Yes.
Because they are very straightforward in that in what the content and what the imagery is. What would you do for something that's a little bit more abstract?
That's a great question. You're right, and actually, visual thinking strategies does sort of direct you to find a narrative piece that has a strong subject matter that comes across. I will tell you personally. That's
a good example, a good switch.
I've had much more direct success using straight visual thinking strategies with abstract works and very, very young children. So if I have an opportunity to bring children into a show that I really don't know they're going to have a lot of connection with the context, or it's very abstract and they may not have the ability to understand what you're looking at because there's no narrative, that's when just letting them rip on what they think is happening, they'll never stop. You'll have to stop them, and they'll create a narrative that, you know, it's really amazing. That's, I would say, from my personal experience, that's been one of the best examples of using visual thinking strategies. And they are definitely, I could sense from the beginning of looking at the painting to the end, they were all empowered because they all knew exactly what that crazy painting was about. And we had no, you know, there was no one telling them, no, that's wrong. Could I talk about, yes.
I just wanted to say, we read this book as part of the book club about a year ago.
Yes.
And, you know, it is really nice. Like he used a lot of photographs when he was writing the book. And it's something nice that ties in with other subject areas. So like if you're an elementary teacher or a middle school teacher and you're teaching about the Depression era in this country, you could use, you know, some Depression photos. It to work really well with recognizable subject matter and having students bring their own personal knowledge to the work, which is a little harder with something that's non-objective. But the thing that was really cool is he talked in the book, they talk about even using this with preschool age children. So yeah, it's not something that's just for middle school and high school kids. It's really for all age levels.
Yes, in fact, I find it easier to work with very, very young children in this way because they truly will not care what information you're trying to impart on them about historical context. That's a really good point. And it also is interesting, it links with Abigail Housen's research where she sort of divvies up different aesthetic stages that we're in. And the more experience we have, the more we get into this reminds me of this, or I can place this in a context, whereas some of our first viewers are really just going on straight observation. So the question that was asked was, how do you know when you're done? Which is a question that I think I get all the time in this industry, in my in my job. Like, how does a painter know when they're done with that painting? You know, there's no real answer to that. Obviously, the book kind of suggests the ideal time is about 20 minutes, but this whole strategy is to get those kids who are quieter to be able to contribute. So if you have the luxury of, you know, a period and looking at 1 or 2 pieces of work, you really want to engage those people who wouldn't normally engage in a sort of raise your hand, answer a question, prompted kind of discussion. The purists would say you aren't to give any hints or background information at all. You are really to try and elicit as much information, even if it's incorrect. Oftentimes I run into a situation where you have 1 or 2 dominant voices and it's hard to break that cycle of them speaking over other people. One of the devices that I might use is to give them a job. So if I have someone who's really comfortable speaking in front of the whole group, I may have them stand where I would stand and do the pointing. And then the rest of the group has to instruct them, you know, where to point. And, you know, that kind of gives them a sense of I'm on stage, and, and it prevents them from really talking over everybody else. It gives them, it redirects that energy. So how much time do we have left? So we have 5 minutes left before you have to face the world. And because I'm a traditional educator that loves to be able to shed light on anything, is there any of the pieces that you want to know about that we didn't talk about? I can then lift the veil. Just because I want you to love this exhibition. We were talking about the Kata Kollwitz piece, and she was married to a physician. And before the First World War broke out, there was this lack of preparation. And in Germany, people were starving. So a lot of her patients that she was seeing were women and children, where the women were literally having to choose which child would not be able to eat based on the rations that they had. So it was not unusual for Kata to depict starvation and that horrible choice of choosing one child over another and watching them die and struggle. So that would inform that piece. The Charles White piece, somebody mentioned Elizabeth Catlett. He was married to her. And he actually did this print while they were in Mexico together. I think it's just fascinating. There's this sense of the pressure that many African-American artists had to reclaim the narrative based on imagery of African-Americans. So this strength that we picked up on was to kind of pull that out. The star definitely may have had something to do with, you know, she's awaiting someone's return. It could be a son, it could be a husband, they could be in the military, or it also could be some, you know, sort of more socialist and communist symbols that they were coming across with the artists that they were hanging out with in Mexico at that time.
There's a question.
Yeah.
In the chat.
Which one?
Piece right here.
Did you find it?
What is the title?
Oh, the title is Awaiting His Return, and it's dated 1945. So we have a couple minutes left. Do you want to go back to the Chagall? Just real quick while I have you. Again, there's Henry Moore, Max Beckman, Man Ray, Georges Braque, some real heavy hitters. There's even a Wyatt, and there's an Avery. Oops, going the wrong way. Sorry. Do-si-do. Okay, so again, this is that the unlikely subject matter that you would see from Chagall. Normally you would see something like, you would expect to see something more like this, right? With maybe a floating goat with some sort of bride. His wife became his muse, especially since once they, let's see, they were, sorry. This is actually an image of his village in Russia, where he was originally from. And they were actually in Paris. He and his wife were in Paris while his home village was getting sacked. And so he has this enormous sense of guilt that he fled while his home was being completely decimated. Then the Nazis overtake Paris, and as Jews, they were really, Chagall and his wife Bella were really in trouble of getting captured by the Nazis. So there was actually a director, I think of the MoMA, that in America that was saving European artists, and he helped them escape to New York, where as soon as they got to New York, Bella comes down with a normal sort of strep throat type of thing. And because of the paucity of antibiotics, she dies. So you'll see a lot of bride and groom lovers as his homage to her. And he'll remarry again, but Bella really is, you know, his childhood, his home. Yes, and this collection was curated by Lauren, our director of exhibitions, from 16 different sources. So it's a logistic nightmare getting shipping and all of that together, but it also means that you likely would never see these exact pieces together ever again. Because her vision was to really give both wars, all different types of people, women and global views of the sort of trauma of war was, I think, something, a common theme that she was going for. So we're at our time. I don't want to go over inadvertently, but I have a few more minutes for those people who want to stay and ask more questions. I'm happy to stay. Don't forget to check your link afterwards for your credits. And thank you so much for coming on this workshop. We could do this again. You know, there's plenty of works even in this show, but we could revisit this again. And again, if you want to come in and see the show, I encourage you to do it. Be my guest. I'll have the roster downstairs and just check in. And we have free parking. So if you're driving a long ways away, maybe make a trip into the Capitol. You're quite welcome. Thank you so much. I love you guys. You're such, I don't know how you do it because it's so hard for me to create digital stuff. And I don't know how you've been doing it for almost a year.
I just want to say thank you again. And it's really interesting. I just keep thinking about this work and the body and the collection of it, and being from two different wars and how the feelings and the issues and everything that were surrounding both wars and how the people were experiencing it. I can't help but think, I kept looking at that, the other piece, and thinking about that mother and thinking that during a pandemic, so many people are still are experiencing some of these same feelings, you know, around the world. So I just think that in a way through this art, it gives a platform for a conversation. It gives a way to kind of look critically, and also allows us to kind of breathe and kind of understand and look at the commonalities with wars and experiences and people. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That was definitely intent, was that we were hoping it would ring true with some of the things that have been going on in the recent past. And we didn't have any idea how relevant some of this would be. I mean, even in just this past week, you know, where access to resources are really something that is happening this moment. So
I keep thinking of that mother and death and all. I'm just thinking of the battle and the struggles that so many mothers are experiencing with young children, and just the battle to kind of be that worker online, even though I don't have that experience, but for young mothers of young children, and it's just so many themes there. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And trauma in general was another thing, just how we deal with trauma, and is there hope to be found? You know, is there a place to go other than just revisiting the trauma? The idea of like memory, someone mentioned, you know, commemorating life behind the trauma, or reclaiming of a narrative. There's all these different avenues that hopefully lift us in creating these images and looking at these images again and again and again to say, okay, there is a place to go. You don't have to kind of be there forever. Great. Well, you guys be well, and hopefully you don't have anything to shovel today, that you did it all yesterday. And again, just thank you so much for all that you do. And I just think that you're great, and can't wait for our next meeting together.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Tina?
Yes.
I just wanted to ask how Lauren is.
She is finishing up her last course of chemotherapy. So she'll have a period of kind of seeing how that goes, and she should be on the mend. They expect her to not have to have another treatment, and her leukemia should go into remission, barring any unusual experience. But she's very strong. I think she's mentally in a new place now, and looking forward to coming back to work. If you know her, she sitting at home, not being at work is probably worse than the physical struggles.
Yeah, I was wondering, I mean, did she put this show together before she found out she was sick, or?
She did, yes. We had installed it. We were doing lights, and at the end she said, you know, I have all these bruises. And I said, yeah, I do too. Hanging around on that ladder, I have a lot of bruises. And she sort of lifted up her jeans leg, and I was like, oh no, those are different kinds of bruises. Like that's a lot worse. And so we encouraged her to go see a doctor. And I said, you know, you may, if you were having trouble because COVID was starting to happen, or no, it was well into it, it was October, but I said, you may want to take pictures of them, because by the time you get into the doctor, they could be gone. So she was taking pictures, and sent one of the pictures to her mother, who said, drop everything and go into urgent care right now. That's not normal. It's not okay.
Right, right.
From that point on, she was admitted into Harrisburg and then to Hershey, and she's had treatment ever since. So it was a very quick set, advancing sort of leukemia, but again, with really, really strong treatments, they expect her to be able to get through it and have it be a distant memory. And she's, you know, she's 30, she's a baby, and she's really strong. She's in great shape. So we have every expectation that we're thinking she might be back in some way this summer, but depending on where we are with COVID and her immunity levels.
Right. That's really scary.
She may not be able to be here with public, you know. Yeah. So it makes for a very, very small staff to be a lot smaller. We were lucky that with all the different sources, we were able to get extensions from, because everybody's doors are closed.
Right.
You know, this should have come down, oh gosh, March maybe. And so we were able to get it extended till May, because we wanted people to see it, but we also, I mean, just the juggling match of how these go back and where they go to, you know, it's a little daunting. It would be good to have Lauren back at least remotely to help us with that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you certainly have a large group of people to pull from if you need help. I mean, include me in on that. I would, you know, I don't know what I'm doing, but you could at least direct me. I don't want to touch anything that's worth money, but I will, and that's everything, but I will.
I mean, we're looking at this, breaking this down on May 16th or May 17th. It's a daunting task. So we may be reaching out, especially if she's not ready to come back yet, because it's really just me and Ross left to do it all, where we would be all hands on deck.
Tina, by mid-March, I think I'll be fully vaccinated, and I'm happy to come back and volunteer whatever you need. So
great. Wonderful. That is all good news. Thank you.
That is if the Moderna doesn't shows up. So
I know. I'm assuming that by the time I qualify, the Johnson & Johnson one will be out, and maybe I only need one. I'm hoping.
Right. I know, but
yeah, as teachers, I think that till 1B rolls around, it's going to be quite a while. So I'm not expecting to see anything until the summer, maybe July, if that. So,
and that is just so wrong.
I know. I'm hoping that we'll turn a corner and it'll get a lot easier than the sort of remnants of struggle.
Well,
right.
Thank you for doing this. I love the VTS strategies. The book was wonderful, and I hope you guys, if you have time, can read it, because it's really a great book. But This was an awesome presentation. Thank you so much.
It seems like it really helps that transition from like the authoritarian pedagogy to the facilitator dialogic pedagogy, which is really helpful to me because I'm like, it's this theoretical concept that sounds so great, but since it's been modeled for me so little in my life, it's hard to know how to do it, you know? So I think
I mean, I'm not great at it either. It takes a lot of practice because every cell in your body wants to say, well, this is really what's happening. This is what you need to know. And it's hard to let a group of kids walk out of here knowing exactly the truth. But, you know, again, it's convincing when you look at the material, it's convincing. I would hate the idea of a group of kids sitting on a bus driving away going, what did we even look at? You know, so not even remember what.
But, you know, Tina, it might be nice to select the few pieces like you did today. And then maybe the takeaway for the student is a card or a slip of paper where they go to, and then you have various different breakdowns of the information that you did want to impart, but you put the ownership again on them to go to a website, and maybe there's like pre-K to 3, you know, like 5 bullet dots. And then of course, you know, the other age level things. So if they were, this type of learning taps into the emotions. So whenever you tap into a learner's emotions, it's been the age-old proven thing that they're going to retain it because they've had an emotional attachment. So if they were emotionally attached and involved, chances are they will, although current learning leads me to think differently these days, but they will. It
would certainly help me sleep at night if I could know that they were leaving with that little piece of paper in their hands. You know?
I know. Oh, it would motivate me as a teacher to know that students are submitting those little pieces of paper, just saying. But it's the battle cry, no matter what subject you teach currently right now. It's just, it is a somewhat depressing state at the lack of kids meeting you halfway. Yeah. Right? I hate to say it, but that unfortunately is the truth everyone's battling with. So,
well, in the landscape of like museum ed, I rarely get the ideal situation where I see kids 10 times. I mean, I rarely see the same kids more than once. So it's very hard to build on an experience the way that you're supposed to repetitively. You know, I have to kind of, my knee-jerk theory of when a school comes in is that I've got to engage them and do something that inspires that thought within the 40 minutes they're here, and then they just go off, you know, and you hope that something stuck. But then I do a hybrid, and I sort of remember that they have to have both experiences. They have to feel, I think the teachers want to feel like you are imparting some kind of knowledge on them, especially if it's a unique historical experience like the contemporary the contemporary Israeli show. You know, there's a lot of information that you can impart on a group of kids who've never seen anything about that or like that. But at the same time, it's important to remember they have to have those self-empowered moments where they don't feel like they're going to walk into the next art gallery and go, I don't know how to look at this stuff, you know, because that would be worse.
Correct.
All right, guys.
Yep. Well, thank you, Amanda, for putting all this together. Tina, again, for your time. Melissa, always good to see you all.
Yeah, good
Take
to see
care.
everybody.
Yep. Stay warm.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.